At 82, her children declared her dead. Then she walked into her own funeral. The coffin was already closed when Eleanor Mercer walked into the church. For almost 20 minutes, everyone in Bellwether believed the old woman was inside it. Rain tapped against the stained glass windows of St. Luke's. At the front of the small white church, under a spray of white roses, stood a dark walnut casket. Closed. No viewing. No final goodbye. Eleanor's 3 children sat in the first row. Carter Mercer sat in the middle, straight-backed in a perfect black suit. He did not cry. He only lowered his head when people looked at him. To his left sat Marlene Voss, Eleanor's daughter. She held a white handkerchief near her face, but it was dry. Every few seconds, her eyes dropped to the phone hidden in her lap. On Carter's right was Neil, the youngest. His hands shook. He stared at the casket like he expected something inside to move. Behind them, neighbors whispered about how fast it had happened and why the casket was closed. Outside in the wet parking lot, a black sedan waited with the engine running. Mason Price, the real estate agent, sat behind the wheel with a yellow sale packet on the seat beside him. 3 miles away at the end of Briar Hill Road, Eleanor's old house stood empty in the rain. The Mercer house. White paint peeling, porch sagging, windows dark. On the iron gate, a fresh sign had been tied with wire. Private estate auction, Friday. It had gone up before the funeral flowers arrived. Inside the church, Reverend Paul Ansel stepped to the pulpit and began to speak about Eleanor's garden, her Sunday pies, and the peach jam she left on porches after storms. But the words felt wrong. Eleanor had been in church only 3 weeks earlier, wearing her gray coat and asking Mrs. Dalloway if her hip was healing. She had looked tired, but not dead. When the Reverend paused, Carter stood and walked to the front with a folded sheet of paper. "My mother was ready," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. The house had become too much. The stairs, the repairs, the bills. She told us many times she did not want to be a burden. She also asked us not to drag things out. Not the service, not the estate, not the house. The word house made Mrs. Rowley, Eleanor's neighbor of 40 years, sit up straighter. Carter unfolded the paper. "Mother left us a short letter. I think she would want it read today." He looked down. "My dear children, if you are hearing this, then my time has come. Do not fight over what is left. Do not hold on to the old house out of guilt. Sell it, divide things fairly, and remember me without sadness." Marlene's phone buzzed. She glanced down. Land agreement ready. Need death certificate copy before Friday. Carter kept reading. "I forgive you all. I know each of you did what you thought was best. I am at peace. Please do not let the Mercer house become a chain around your lives." Neil leaned forward, breathing through his mouth. Carter lifted his eyes. "That was Mother," he said softly. "Always thinking of us." Then the front doors of St. Luke's opened with a long, wooden groan. Every head turned. A gust of wet air swept down the aisle. In the doorway stood an old woman in a soaked gray coat. Her white hair was pinned badly. Her shoes were muddy. In her left hand, she held a black leather purse. In her right, she leaned on a wooden cane. For one breath, no one understood what they were seeing. Then Mrs. Rowley screamed. Marlene's phone hit the pew. Neil stood so fast, the bench scraped the floor. Carter did not move. The paper in his hand bent under his fingers. The old woman took one step inside, then another. Rainwater dripped from her coat onto the church floor. Reverend Ansel gripped the pulpit. "Eleanor," he whispered. Eleanor Mercer walked halfway down the aisle. She looked past the flowers, past the casket, and straight at her children. Carter's face had turned gray. Marlene's mouth was open.
Neil looked like a boy caught with a match in a dry barn. Eleanor stopped beside the casket. For the first time, she looked at it. Then she looked at Carter. "You had the funeral ready," she said, "before I was even gone." Carter tried to speak. "Mother," Eleanor raised one hand. The word died. She turned to the Reverend. "Paul, do not finish this service." Then she looked at the casket again. "And before anyone buries me, you might want to find out who is in that box." Sheriff Ray Holcomb was the first person to move. He had been standing near the back wall, hat in his hands. In Bellwether, even the sheriff came to funerals. He was slow, tired, and easy to underestimate. He did not miss this. "Reverend," he said, "step away from the pulpit." Carter turned. "Ray, this is a family matter." Holcomb looked at the casket, then at Eleanor. "No," he said. "It stopped being that when a dead woman walked through the door." Eleanor stood beside the coffin, pale and wet, with a yellow bruise near her jaw, but her eyes were clear. Carter stepped toward her with both hands raised. "Mother, you're confused. Let's get you somewhere quiet." Eleanor looked at his hands. "Don't touch me." He stopped. Marlene stood too. "Mom, you scared us. We thought—" "You thought I would not find a phone," Eleanor said. Marlene froze. Sheriff Holcomb moved closer. "Mrs. Mercer, can you tell me where you've been?" "I can." "Do you need medical help first?" "I needed medical help 2 weeks ago," she said. "That was before my children decided I was easier to handle under a different name." Eleanor opened her purse and took out a plastic hospital bracelet. The sheriff read it. The name was not Eleanor Mercer. It said, Ellen Morris. "That's my maiden name," Eleanor said. "I haven't used it in 61 years. Marlene's voice sharpened. "Mom, the hospital made a mistake." Eleanor pulled out a damp receipt. "Pine Hollow Care Unit, room 214. 2 weeks ago, I fell in my kitchen," Eleanor said. The phone line was dead. Carter came first, then Marlene, then Neil. I asked for an ambulance. Carter said one was coming. Marlene took my purse. Neil took my keys. Carter took my phone. Neil closed his eyes. At the hospital, Marlene told the nurse I was confused. She said Ellen Morris was safer because there had been family trouble. Carter signed forms. Neil signed too. Neil whispered, "I didn't know what it was." Eleanor looked at him. "You never asked." The room went silent. "The next morning," she said, "I was moved to Pine Hollow, 40 miles out. They took my clothes, my phone, and my right to call anyone. They let me keep my Bible because no one thought an old woman could escape with a Bible." Carter turned to the sheriff. "Ray, she had a fall. This is trauma." Eleanor took a small black Bible from her purse and opened it to an old photo of Mercer House. "There was a nurse on the night shift, Tessa. She saw this picture and asked where it was. I told her Bellwether. Then she asked my name. I said Eleanor Mercer." Marlene gripped the pew.
Tessa had seen my obituary that morning. It said I died peacefully surrounded by my children. A bitter laugh escaped Mrs. Rowley. I was in room 214, alive, with a death notice already printed. That was the first crack in the story. And stories like this do not start with yelling. They start with one paper someone hides, one name someone changes, one old woman placed in a room where no one is supposed to find her. So stay with this, because what happened in that church was only the door opening. What Eleanor carried in that purse would lead back to a house, a locked box, and a letter her children had spent years trying to bury. Tessa called her brother, Eleanor said. He drives medical transport. He brought clothes, my cane, and a prepaid phone. She said, "If you are right, Mrs. Mercer, they already stole your funeral." Sheriff Holcomb folded the receipt and put it in his coat pocket.
"What do you want me to do right now?" he asked. Eleanor looked at the casket. "Open it." Funeral director Amos Bell stepped from the side aisle. His face was red. "Sheriff, I cannot allow that. The family requested a closed service." Carter moved fast. "This is insane. You are not opening my mother's casket because an injured old woman wandered in." Eleanor turned to him. "Your mother is standing in front of you." "You were declared incompetent for medical purposes," Carter snapped. The words left his mouth too quickly. Neil looked up. Marlene shut her eyes. Sheriff Holcomb heard it too. "Declared by who?" he asked. Carter said nothing. Eleanor reached into her purse and took out a small brass key tied with blue thread. Carter stared at it like it was a weapon. "Samuel gave me this before he died," she said. "He told me there would come a day when someone in this family would ask me to sign something I did not understand. If that day came, I was to go to Bellwether Saving and open Box 39. The sheriff turned to Amos. "Open the casket." Amos looked at Carter. That was his mistake. Everyone saw it. The sheriff and 2 deputies lifted the lid only a few inches. They did not need more. Inside was no body, no Eleanor, no white hair, no folded hands. There was only a sealed urn resting on satin with a printed label taped to the side. The sheriff read the label, then he looked at Amos. "Whose remains are these?" Amos did not answer. Carter glanced toward the side door. A deputy stepped in front of it. Holcomb lifted the paper under the urn. "This is not you," he said to Eleanor. "No," Eleanor answered. The sheriff turned to Carter, Marlene, and Neil. "So the question is," he said, "who did you put in your mother's coffin?" Neil bent forward and began to sob, and Eleanor Mercer stood beside the box they had tried to bury her in, holding the key her dead husband had left behind. The Mercer house stood at the edge of Bellwether, where Briar Hill Road narrowed near the old orchard. The paint was peeling. The porch sagged. Behind the house, Samuel's apple trees stood bare and crooked. Sheriff Holcomb stopped near the porch. Clara Whitcomb parked behind him. She was Samuel's old lawyer, and one of the few people he had trusted. Eleanor looked at the auction sign on the gate. "They tied it to Samuel's gate," she said. "I'll have it removed," Holcomb said. "No, leave it. I want to remember how fast they moved." Inside, the house had been sorted. Not cleaned, sorted. Boxes lined the wall. Kitchen lot, bedroom linens, tools, auction lot, frames. The braided rug was gone. The china cabinet was half empty. Empty squares marked the walls where family photos had hung. The house had not been robbed in a hurry. It had been emptied with labels. Eleanor stood in the doorway. "To my neighbors, this is an old house," she said. "To my children, it is land. But to me, this is the last thing Samuel touched that still knows his hand." Clara opened a folder on the piano. "1 month ago, Bellwether approved the South Bypass extension. The Mercer property became the key parcel for the commercial entrance road." "How much?" the sheriff asked. "The first offer was $870,000. The second may have crossed $1 million. Eleanor did not move. "The house is in Mrs. Mercer's name?" Holcomb asked. "Only her name," Clara said. "Samuel changed that 15 years ago." Eleanor remembered Samuel taking her to Clara's office years earlier. When she asked why, he said, "Because I know our children, and you keep seeing who they were at 8 instead of who they are now." Clara placed another paper down. "They could not sell without your signature. First came pressure. They said the stairs were unsafe, then the wiring. Then Carter filed an inspection request. Then they explored guardianship." Eleanor looked toward the kitchen.
"And when I would not sign," she said, "I fell." Holcomb's face changed. "Do you think the fall was caused?" "I don't know. I only know the phone line was dead before I touched the floor." That was enough. In Samuel's study, the desk drawers were open and the metal safe stood empty. Carter had always thought Samuel kept important papers there. Samuel used to laugh at that. "A safe tells a thief where to start," he once told Eleanor. "A house gives better hiding places." Eleanor stopped by the fireplace. Samuel's old brass clock sat on the mantel. It had not worked in years, but it had been moved. Only an inch. Eleanor knew. She lifted it. Behind it, there was only dust. No envelope, no folded note, nothing. "What should be there?" Clara asked. "A letter," Eleanor said. "Samuel left one there after he died. It said, 'If you ever need to know where the first truth is, start where I kept time.'" "And now it's gone," Holcomb said. "Yes." Then Eleanor saw a fresh scratch behind the clock. Someone had pried at the seam. "They searched here," she said. But Samuel had been more careful than that. A sentence came back to her. He had said it near the end, when he was weak in the downstairs bedroom. "If the mantel is empty, look where the house learned your name." Eleanor walked to the lower kitchen cabinet near the stove. She opened the door and ran her fingers along the inside. There, beneath layers of paint, she felt it. A shallow carving. Eleanor. Samuel had carved it there 6 days after they married. She saw him again, young and proud, kneeling with a pocket knife. "We already signed papers at the courthouse," she had told him. "Courthouses forget," he said. "Houses remember." Now Eleanor pressed her palm to the old letters. Her fingers moved lower. A hidden panel shifted. The sheriff worked it loose with a pocket knife. Behind it was a thin slot. Inside was an envelope. On the front, in Samuel's handwriting, were 3 words. "For my Eleanor." Eleanor opened it. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then the mantel is empty, and one of our children has already searched the obvious places. I hoped I was wrong.
A father should hope that, but hope is not a plan. I am not afraid of dying. I am afraid of what they will do to you when I am gone. Carter came on April 3rd with a new will. He said it was cleaner. When I refused, he said a house like this should not sit in the hands of an old woman who could be talked into anything. Marlene came on April 11th, with papers hidden inside a church bulletin. She waited until after my evening pills. She said it was a medical release. It was a property transfer. Neil came on May 2nd. I believe he was scared, but he held my wrist while Carter told me to sign a bank paper. I asked him to let go. He did, but not fast enough. The original deed is not with the family lawyer. I no longer trust him. The true will is not in my desk, not in the safe, and not with any child of ours. Bellwether Savings, Box 39, record number 7714-M. Ask for the March 18th entry. If the envelope has been touched, Clara will know what to do. Clara stood at once. "That record number tracks access history," she said. "Samuel knew someone might open the box." Before she could call the bank, the front door opened. Marlene stood there in her black funeral dress, rain on her hair. Her eyes went to the sheriff, then to the open cabinet. She understood too fast. "What are you doing?" she asked. Eleanor folded Samuel's letter. "I came home." "You should be checked by a doctor." "I was checked by strangers for 2 weeks." Marlene stepped inside. Her voice softened, but the softness had teeth. "Mom, please. People are talking. The sheriff is involved. You're going to destroy this family." "This family tried to bury me." "No. We tried to protect you." "From what?" "From yourself. From the house. From bills you don't understand. The bypass changed everything. There is real money now, enough for care." "Enough for all of us to breathe." "All of us," Eleanor said. "You always make us sound greedy." Eleanor looked at the cracked tile where she had fallen. Then she faced her daughter. "Was I unsafe?" she asked. "Or was I expensive?" Marlene stared at her. No answer came. Clara returned from the hall, her phone in her hand. "I spoke to Bellwether Savings," she said. "Box 39 was opened 2 days before your death notice was filed." The sheriff stepped closer. "By who?" Clara looked at Marlene, then at Eleanor. "Carter." At Bellwether Savings, manager Gordon Pike tried to hesitate. "Families handle things privately here," he said. Eleanor looked at him. In Bellwether, that often meant, do not open the door, even if someone is bleeding behind it. Clara laid Samuel's letter, the Pine Hollow receipt, and the hospital bracelet marked Ellen Morris on the counter. "This is fraud against a living woman," she said. "We need the access record for Box 39. Sheriff Holcomb added, "I can ask now, or I can come back with a warrant." Gordon nodded. In the back office he pulled up the record. Box 39 had been opened by Carter Mercer 2 days before Eleanor's death notice. He used an old power of attorney that had expired years earlier. Clara's voice went cold. "Did he show you a court order?" "No." "Guardianship papers?" "No." "A death certificate?" "No." Holcomb said, "You let a man into a living woman's bank box because he sounded sure?" Gordon looked at Eleanor. "I knew him since he was a boy." "You knew me longer,"
Eleanor said. Gordon pulled up the camera footage. Carter entered the vault. 3 minutes later, he came out with a thick brown envelope tucked under his coat. They opened box 39. It was almost empty. The deed was gone. The true will was gone. But under the metal tray, Eleanor saw the corner of a photo. She pulled it out. The picture showed Mercer House in summer. Samuel stood near the porch. Eleanor stood beside him, young and dark-haired. Between them stood a little girl, maybe 4 years old, thin, with dark curls and one sock lower than the other. She held Eleanor's hand. "That isn't Marlene," Clara said softly. "No," Eleanor whispered. On the back, Samuel had written, "Grace at the house, 1968. Eleanor sat down. A hospital room came forward in her mind. White walls, the smell of bleach. Eleanor, 23 years old, asking where her baby was. A doctor not meeting her eyes. The words they gave her had lived in her bones for more than 50 years. The baby did not survive. They told her not to ask to see the child. They said it would be too hard. But now Eleanor looked at the photo. Grace. The child was not dead. She was standing in front of Eleanor's house, holding Eleanor's hand. Clara found a thin note stuck under the tray, Samuel's writing. "This is the first proof. They lied to us. Grace lived. Born March 9th, 1968. Taken from County Hospital under transfer code M17. Adoption sealed through Havenbrook, Arkansas. I found her too late, but not too late for the truth. The children must not find this before Eleanor does. If they know there is another heir, they will not stop at the house." The sheriff read the note. "Another heir," he said. Eleanor held the photo against her chest. Her children were not only afraid of losing money, they were afraid someone else had a claim. A legal heir. A daughter the family had buried in paperwork long before they tried to bury Eleanor. By sunset, Carter had stopped pretending to grieve. He called the real estate agent and said the auction was still on. He told the developer there had been a minor family disturbance. By evening, he had filed an emergency statement saying Eleanor was mentally unstable and unable to handle her affairs. Marlene brought a medical letter to the courthouse. It said Eleanor showed signs of memory loss and paranoia after her fall, but Clara knew the doctor's signature. "That is not Dr. Ellis's signature," she told the clerk. By night, the doctor had denied writing it. The sheriff had the fake letter in an evidence bag. At 10:46, a soft knock came at Mercer House's back door. 3 small taps. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with Grace's photo in front of her. She touched the prepaid phone in her pocket and pressed record. "Who is it?" A pause. "It's me, Mom." "Neil." She opened the door. He stood on the step, wet from walking through the orchard. His tie was gone, his shirt was wrinkled, his eyes were red. "Please," he said, "I need to talk before Carter finds out I came." Eleanor let him in. He sat across from her in Samuel's chair. "I didn't want it to go that far," he said. "The fall? The hospital? Pine Hollow? The obituary? The coffin?" Neil's mouth trembled. "The funeral." He said Carter told him it was the only way to make the sale clean. If they waited, Eleanor would fight. If she fought, the developer might pull the offer. "What else would fall apart?" Eleanor asked. Neil looked away. "He said there was another person." Eleanor went still. What person? I don't know his name. His? Neil closed his eyes. Carter found something in the bank box. Papers, an address, a birth record. He said Dad tried to ruin everything from the grave. He said there might be someone with Mercer blood who could make a claim. A claim to what? The house, the land, maybe all of it. And you still helped him. Neil cried then. He said you'd be safe at Pine Hollow until the auction was done. Then we'd move you somewhere nicer. My care, Eleanor said. I know. No, I don't think you do. Neil covered his face. The coffin was never supposed to be opened, he said. Who was in it? Nobody. Not like that. It was an urn. Unclaimed remains. Amos had access. Carter said no one would ask questions if it stayed closed. Even the dead had been used. And the obituary? Marlene sent it in before you were moved to Pine Hollow. Before. Not after.
And the death notice? There's a woman in county records, Denise Ketter. She goes to Carter's church. She pushed it through as pending paperwork. Carter said the real certificate would follow after the estate transfer. Eleanor looked at her youngest child, the boy who once brought her dandelions in a mug and called them yellow roses. But weakness had signed papers, taken keys, and sat beside her coffin. Why did you come? She asked. Neil folded forward. Because I saw your face in the church, and I knew Dad would have hated us. Your father did not hate easily, Eleanor said, but he saw clearly. Headlights swept across the kitchen wall. Clara entered through the back door with a large brown folder. She saw Neil, then she saw Eleanor's face. What did he say? Eleanor placed the phone on the table. I recorded him, not for punishment, for proof. Clara opened the folder. I found proof too. She laid a birth certificate under the kitchen light. Grace Eleanor Mercer, born March 9, 1968. Mother, Eleanor Ruth Mercer. Father, Samuel Thomas Mercer. There was no death stamp, no burial record. Instead, clipped behind it, was a sealed adoption transfer. Haven Brook, Arkansas. Eleanor touched the name. Grace Eleanor Mercer. They had given the baby her name. Then they had taken her away. A knock came at the front door. Clara returned with Mrs. Rowley, wrapped in a brown raincoat and holding an envelope in plastic. Samuel gave me this before he died, Mrs. Rowley said. He told me not to give it to you unless the house started moving too fast. On the front, Samuel had written, If they rush the house, they have found Grace. Inside were 2 pages and 1 photograph. A woman in her late 40s stood outside a small library. She had Eleanor's eyes and Samuel's chin. Dark curls going gray, a blue cardigan, a stack of books in her arms. On the back, Samuel had written, Grace, Havenbrook, alive, October 2014. Clara read the letter. My Eleanor, I found her. Her name is Grace, though the family who raised her changed it for many years. She knows she was adopted. She does not yet know us. I did not tell you because I wanted to bring you the whole truth, not another wound without answers. She lived in Havenbrook, Arkansas. She became a school librarian. She was sick for some time, but she lived a full life. I found records that say she had a son. His name is Daniel Price. I am trying to find him. If I cannot, Look for the address in box 39. Do not let Carter near it. If Carter learns there is a grandson, he will see him not as blood, but as a threat." The room froze. Daniel Price. Neil looked down. "The address?" Eleanor said. Neil nodded. "I think Carter took it." Now the whole crime had shape. Carter was not only trying to sell land. Marlene was not only trying to control medical papers. Neil was not only too weak to say no. They had found out there might be another heir. A living line from the daughter Eleanor was never allowed to raise, and Carter had taken his address before anyone else could find him. By Friday morning, the auction sign was still on the gate. Eleanor had asked them not to remove it. The yard was full. Buyers stood with coffee cups and bid sheets. Neighbors gathered near the fence. The real estate agent waited near the porch. A man from the development company stood by the tent, looking more at the field than the house. That was what they wanted. Not the kitchen where Samuel carved Eleanor's name, not the porch, not the apple trees. Just the field, just the road, just the money. Carter arrived 10 minutes before noon with Marlene beside him. Neil did not come with them. Carter stepped out in a dark suit, wearing the calm face he had worn at the funeral. "Everyone," he called, "before rumors make this worse, I need to say something." The yard quieted. "My mother has suffered a medical event. She is confused. She is grief-stricken. She has been influenced by people who do not understand our family.
She does not understand what she is signing." Behind the screen door, Eleanor listened. Clara stood beside her, and beside Clara stood a man Eleanor had met only 9 hours earlier. Daniel Price. He was in his early 40s, tired from driving through the night. Clara had found him through old library records in Havenbrook. At first he did not believe the story. Then she sent him Samuel's photo of Grace. He called back in 6 minutes. "That's my mother," he said. Now Daniel held birth records, adoption papers, Grace's death certificate, and a photo of his mother wearing a small silver locket. Samuel had described that locket in his last letter. It was Eleanor's locket, the one she had been told was lost at the hospital. Outside, Carter kept speaking. "My siblings and I have only tried to protect her." The screen door opened. Eleanor stepped onto the porch. She wore a dark blue dress, her gray coat, and Samuel's wedding ring on a chain around her neck. Clara came out on her right. Sheriff Holcomb moved closer to the steps. Daniel followed last. Carter's face changed when he saw Daniel. Only for a second, but Eleanor saw it. "Mother," Carter said, "you should be resting." "I rested enough in room 214, the crowd whispered. "This auction is over," Eleanor said. Mason Price raised his clipboard. "Mrs. Mercer, I understand emotions are high, but—" "You have a sign on my gate," Eleanor said. "You do not have my permission." Sheriff Holcomb stepped beside her. "That's enough for me." The developer's man frowned. "There are agreements in place." Clara opened her briefcase. "No valid agreement signed by Eleanor Mercer. No estate authority. No death certificate. No court order." Carter opened box 39 with an expired power of attorney. "We have the bank log and video. Marlene filed a forged medical letter. We have the doctor's denial. Neil Mercer gave a recorded statement confirming the false obituary, the Pine Hollow placement, and the urn in the casket." Marlene went pale. Carter looked around and laughed. "This is a performance." "No," Clara said. "This is record correction." Daniel stepped forward.
My name is Daniel Price. My mother was Grace Price. Before adoption, she was Grace Eleanor Mercer. He lifted the birth certificate. Born March 9th, 1968. Mother, Eleanor Ruth Mercer. Father, Samuel Thomas Mercer. No death record, no stillborn certificate, a sealed adoption transfer to Haven Brook, Arkansas. The yard fell still. Daniel held up the photo of Grace wearing the locket. My mother wore this until the day she died. She never knew where it came from. Eleanor touched her throat, where that locket used to rest. Carter snapped. Even if that is true, it changes nothing. My mother is not competent. That is the issue. Clara nodded to Eleanor. Eleanor took out a sealed envelope. You thought your father kept the deed in box 39, she said. Carter said nothing. He wanted you to think that. Clara opened the envelope. Samuel recorded a controlling deed amendment 10 years before his death. The original stamped copy was held in escrow at my office. I was not allowed to open it unless one of 3 things happened. Eleanor was declared dead under disputed circumstances. A guardianship claim was filed without independent medical review, or someone tried to force the sale of Mercer House without Eleanor appearing before a judge. She looked at Carter. All 3 happened. Then Clara read, If any direct heir or beneficiary attempts to force sale, transfer, guardianship, incompetency, or death declaration of Eleanor Ruth Mercer for the purpose of gaining control of Mercer House or its land, all such beneficiary interest shall be voided and transferred to the Mercer Shelter Trust. Marlene took 1 step back. Carter's voice dropped. That's not legal. Clara looked over her glasses. It was reviewed and recorded. You would know that if you had searched records instead of stealing envelopes. Eleanor stepped forward.
The trust does not belong to my children. It does not belong to Daniel. It keeps this house as a safe home for elderly people whose families forgot they were still living. Carter stared at her. You can't give away our inheritance. Eleanor looked at him for a long time. You tried to give away my life. That ended it. Sheriff Holcomb nodded to his deputies. At the gate, Amos Bell, the funeral director, had just arrived. He did not make it past the drive. A deputy stopped him. Minutes later, he was in handcuffs for falsifying funeral records and unlawful handling of remains. Marlene began to cry, real tears this time, but they did not move Eleanor the way they once had. A deputy approached her with the forged medical letter in an evidence sleeve. Carter tried to argue, but Holcomb read off the charges being prepared: fraud, elder abuse, false filing, conspiracy, and theft connected to the bank box. From the back of the crowd, Neil stepped forward. He looked terrible, pale, unshaven, but steady. I signed, he said, and I'll testify. Carter stared at him. Neil did not look away. I should have said no at the hospital, he said. I should have said no at Pine Hollow. I should have said no before Mom had to walk into her own funeral. But I'm saying it now. No one clapped. No one needed to. The auction tent came down before evening. The buyers left quietly. The developer's man drove away without shaking anyone's hand. Mason Price removed the red sign from the gate himself and laid it face down in his car. Carter and Marlene left with the sheriff. Neil stayed near the edge of the yard, but he did not come close. Maybe he knew he had no right to ask for forgiveness that day. Daniel stood near the porch, unsure what to do with his hands. Eleanor looked at him. There was so much she could not give him, not Grace's childhood, not the birthdays,
Not the lost years, not the nights Grace may have wondered why she was given away.
Eleanor could give only truth, and even truth had come late. "I don't know how to be your grandmother," she said. Daniel's eyes shone. "I don't know how to be your grandson." For the first time in days, Eleanor smiled. "Then we won't start with titles." "What do we start with?" Eleanor looked toward the apple trees. "Tea," she said, "and your mother's stories." That evening, Clara handed Eleanor one final envelope from Samuel's escrow file. Eleanor opened it on the porch as the sun lowered behind the orchard. "My Eleanor, if Clara gives you this, then the house has had to defend you, and I am sorry I was not there to do it myself. I know a house is only wood, nails, and weather unless people put life inside it. I also know our children may one day forget that you are not part of the furniture. You are not something to be moved, sold, signed over, or placed away when inconvenient. This house will not save you from loneliness. No deed can do that. But it can stand as proof that your life belonged to you. Proof that your name was carved here before they learned to want what you had. Proof that no child, no court paper, and no lie spoken in a church can bury a woman before her time. If they ever try to bury you before your time, let the house speak for you. And when you are ready, let it shelter others who were also told they were too old, too costly, or too much trouble to keep." Eleanor folded the letter. For the first time since walking into her own funeral, she cried fully. For Samuel, for Grace, for the young mother in the hospital bed who had been told her baby was gone, for every year stolen by people who thought silence was mercy. 6 months later, the Mercer house had fresh paint. Not perfect paint, just warm white, the way Samuel first painted it. The porch was repaired. The third step still groaned because Eleanor insisted one complaint should remain. A ramp led to the side door. The upstairs rooms became bedrooms. The parlor became a common room. The dining room held a long table where people could eat together, or sit in silence if that was all they had strength for. The first residents came with small bags and long silences. A woman left at a motel, a retired driver whose nephews sold his trailer, and Lottie, who still kept her daughter's picture in a Bible. Eleanor greeted each of them at the door, not as charity, as proof. Daniel came every other weekend. Sometimes he brought his 2 daughters. They ran through the yard and asked Eleanor about Grace. Eleanor told them what she knew. When she did not know, she said so. No more family stories built on lies. One clear afternoon, Clara came with a small brass plaque wrapped in brown paper. They fixed it beside the front door. Eleanor ran her fingers over the words. The Mercer House, for those still living. Behind her, the house was not quiet anymore. A kettle whistled. Someone laughed in the parlor. A radio played an old song Samuel used to hum. And inside the kitchen cabinet, hidden where no guest would see, Eleanor's carved name remained beneath the paint. The house remembered. The letters proved it. And the woman they tried to bury lived long enough to open the door for others. If this story made you think of someone the world forgot too soon, write their name in the comments. Let someone remember them here.